Hello and welcome everybody in the room and online. Welcome to this R&D Unplugged number 10. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming our own Maria Angelica. I will cut it short for her to make a presentation. Maria Angelica, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And we're here and online. Thanks to Chad and Arena for the invitation. It's an honor to be part of this series of presentation. And I will speak about from talk to action, the influence of our worldviews on education and science. And I will speak since the perspective of science education. And I will, just to start, I would like to know that the people can raise their hands and the people online can write, this is your background, if you're from research side, or you are from education, or if you any moment to be facilitator or give one workshop.
Research.
From research education. Education, training, independent training. Nice. To start, I want that you imagine one classroom or one workshop. Maybe since your perspective like facilitator, or maybe like a participant. But this classroom, this workshop have a characteristic that is like just the scientific knowledge is the valid in the moment. You can bring other kind of discussion. How you think the classroom will be, which characteristics you can have. So sure, I don't. You can think perfect about your experience, like facilitator, or like when you were a student, or when you participate in one kind of action.
If you know, top-down transmission of knowledge, that's what probably happens if it is.
Yeah, it's like the traditional classroom. For example, in mathematics, the traditional education is like the teacher uses one kind of formula, you resolve, but maybe you like the students, you have other way to resolve the same problem, but it's not valid because it's not the way that the teacher used, right? Or don't have the cultural perspectives, for example, in consideration. Now, let's think like citizens. When we are speaking about McDonald's, they already are a kind of image in your mind, just if you read or not, but everyone knows McDonald's. And it's like, that appears like emotions and like the happiness. And if we speak about Coca-Cola, for example, or one beer, we can always think like the views, the friends, the emotional, the joy, the fun, yeah? So, why these runs, like we're speaking about marketing, we're speaking about different kinds of products, they always agree to the emotions. However, when we are speaking about education, and when we are speaking about research, we don't use it, we do not have emotions. And we ask like the participants to leave the emotion outside of the discussion. So that was just something like to contextualize a little why I am speaking about this kind of two scenarios. It's because I will speak how I say, since the science education, since the perspective of the critical values, that is one philosophy perspective that work. And Roy Bhaskar say that all human action will have some kind of power. And have the cognitive that refers to the way that we understand and we interpret the world. The cognitive that is the intentions and the will to act, adaptability, that is the emotions linked into the action, the dynamic, that is all the circumstances that we can say political and all that, and the circumstances that is the context. These powers we can divide in two categories: the competencies that are speaking about the skills that can be technical, the facilities, that is all the context, the political, economic, and all of this. And the presentation will be focused in the link between the cognitive, that is interpretation, the cognitive, the act, and the affect. So to start about the cognitive and to the way that we can understand the world, we have kind of influence about what we understand like the scientific knowledge. And for that, we start to ask how you are imagining one classroom where the scientific knowledge is the only valid. And we have one heritage of the science in education is that we think that the science is the unique true valid. Yeah, and however, I am saying that the science are and the disciplines are important for teach, but the education also need to have the content of the disciplines, but it is not the unique things that need to be in consideration for one training process. We need to have all the kind of dimensions we consider it. And it's for that that we can say that we need to have a multifaceted approach to knowledge. And this perspective of science and the unique true or the unique approach that you need to have is also part and one heritage of the institutionalization of science. So is the relation between state and science. So in some countries, for example, Brazil, we see the flag. We say power, order and power. And order and progress, yes. That is one result of perspective of the science. However, for some researchers in science education say for we can speak about science issues that we can bring that for different kind of training. Yeah, we need to know the subject matter knowledge, but we can consider it, for example, the philosophy of science, the cognitive science, the sociology, the pedagogy, and the history of science. So, for example, now we are facing climate change, and we need to have this scientific knowledge for can understand like phenomena. So we can speak about weather, for the difference of the climate, and can understand the physics and chemistry process and biological, but also have other dimensions, social level. So we can use, for example, the political discourse as educational resources that will permit, for example, have discussion about scientific issues. So scientific issues do reference climate change. Inside the science, we have controversies. So have people who don't want to recognize, have people and have discussions. So that is one socio-scientific issues that can generate one horizontal dialogue that permit us also to have discussion about the natural science. So science, how we are producing the science, what is the interest of the people, for example, that are in opposition of the climate change, why so how is the process to build this relationship? And we can, for example, link also with society. So what I said in some political discourses related to that, and how that is opposed or supporting, for example, the social movement. One example about how we can use that in education too is, for example, the necessity to communicate the new understanding, evaluating the success, taking responsibility to learning, and we can after engage with that topic. So, for example, if we use the climate change and the political dimension like one way to understand the topic, after we can develop a question. So we can ask how are the political dimension of climate change addressing the country in France, or we can compare, and after needs to be known. So what is the, if we're speaking about discourses, what is the political strategies of the discourse they are using, review resources that are speaking about that. So we can compare, for example, what the IPCC reports are saying, what are saying the new reports, assessing the data that is important to have this critical thinking, and synthesizing and also that generate discussion. Why is important to speak about critical thinking in one training process? Because like that we can have influence, we can understand that the revolution of science of knowledge is not one neutral process and can be influenced for contextual moment, for the contextual process, socio-political. So for example, the COVID, the vaccine of the COVID was produced because it was in one specific period of time. It wasn't something that was, for example, many research about that was one urgence to work on that. And if we don't develop on that, the critical thinking, that will also be influence how is our daily life and how we are understanding all information that we are receiving. Why? Because if we speak in terms of discourses, we can say that all the processes always are having intention. All process of communication have an objective and have ideologies behind also, and scientific knowledge can become one strategy of legitimization. That is one ideological operation mode. That means I can use the language of the science to legitimize some information that I want to convince someone and then adapt to that. So, for example, the use of the science have some kind of groups that are using the authority of science to say that the race is associated with the intelligence. So, why it is important to have this kind of perception? Because they will do use of the authority of science to make various arguments to seem credible. They will select interpretation. They will show the data they want. No, they don't want to show all the data possible. They want just use the data that will help them to convince people about the argument they are having. And that is also bringing ideological legitimization. So if they are doing this mean, for example, race and intelligence relationship, that is helping to the racism, for example. And other thing is have some kind of strategies. For example, the statistics are normally very important to that. And the news and in the society are using that also to legitimize some information. So here I'm going just one example, just to pass fast about that. Now that have all this political climate about MMOs in the United States. And for example, have one news that is about the protest movement against him. And they are using numbers, but they don't write the numbers. So they are referring 1,000 of democratic activists, but the focus of 1,000 don't call the attention, for example. If we see the other ones that they put in numbers, 211 million followers. So that is kind of a strategy that we can find in our daily life. If we are not having this critical thinking, we can get manipulated so easier. So in this context, for some authors like Enrique Lev, they say that we are not just facing one environmental crisis, but one knowledge crisis. Why one knowledge crisis? Because the use of the science is linked to economic and power interests. So in this sense, the science is not helping to transform society in one good way, I can say. but it is answering the interesting ones. And that bring also one traditionalist view of nature. So the nature, like one technocratic perspective, like what I can take from nature in economic way. So again, the question is, in what ways is knowledge expressed, assumed, omitted, and distributed? Because we can speak about science, like I said, the example of the Russians, but they are omitting information who can argument that. Yeah? And if we speak about context, about the cultural perspectives, in many countries are omitting information and knowledge. So I will bring two examples. One was 3 years ago already, that I lived in Germany. I was doing one workshop about environmental education since this critical perspective. And I bring the topic about the necessity to empower women, and have one doctoral student from University, and she was saying that she was like kind of surprised that I bring this kind of topic to discussion. She said that if I was in Russia, I would go to jail because I was one woman and speaking about to empower more women, that would be problematic. And we are having also here in the master the students who are having a project about research the Tibetan culture. And they are just discovering that this is censored in China. They cannot speak about strength the Tibetan culture. So we see that how we can have privilege about the knowledge that we can have and the freedom that we have, but we need to be critical that when we receive in our educational process, in our daily life, what is the information that we are seeing as we have something that is omitted in that. And also have other part that I say to you that is linked to the emotions. So we focus many time in this scientific knowledge that is approved and that is like established. And however, we are just reducing the knowledge to this mere set of facts, ignoring the transformative potential. And as I say, we are living outside the appeals to the emotions. And all these different aspects, emotions, critical thinking, cultural perspective, contextual dimensions are important to consider. Have many neuroscience studies that are showing that the emotions are important in decision making and in learning process. And the empathy and emotional connections can improve information retention and foster creativity in problem solving. So some universities in Spain, the Faculty of Medicine, are starting to use activities like meditation and considering emotions in the learning process, because they are considering that the patients, when they have someone sick, just to give the pills is not enough. They need to have also one emotional support, and it's important that. And here I bring the example about my mom, when she discovered that she had cancer. The doctor say, don't explain to everyone, because some people with so negative emotions, and many times it's these negative emotions will put you more down and more sick. Because the people many have this negative appeal and not like support or good and science is advanced and things like that. So the emotions is always important in that. Other example is about speaking about socio-environmental problems, climate change, so that will influence our act also. So if we have, for example, one optimist perspective, this emotion will strengthen the agency that we have. We want to be empowered, we want to create a scenario to change. However, if we have one pessimistic perspective, the emotion will weaken our agency. So we think like we cannot do nothing, it's too late because it's not possible. So the emotions are also influencing our way to act. And have the role of the language and experience. So since the critical discourse analysis, we assume that the language is one of social practices and is shaping also the relationship and the social practice. So we cannot think that the discourse is just something like in the air, because with the discourses we can mobilize and create kind of behaviors on people. And here I bring the example too of Trump when he was in his training of candidate, that he was saying that immigrants were eating the beds, and have people who believe these kind of things, and that shape the behaviors of some people against the immigrants with racist behaviors. So if we speak about training, one process of training, we need to consider also this kind of behavior we are using, because we are shaping also the relationships, for example, in the space. And the experience also that we learn, that we live in different contexts and in the learning process too, that are also shaping our ways to understand and to engage. So it's for that when we do facilitate one workshop or education of teachers, it's very important, because the learning is one very transformative dimension that can take different ways in our connection with society. So in conclusions, I want to show that, for example, in the science education, we have, since the critical values, we need to think how one social structure, and this social structure will shape the relationship. So I can start, for example, with educational policies. These educational policies can restrict the autonomy of the teachers, for example. According to how we interpret, translate, and formulate the policies, we can create one curriculum. This curricula will influence the teacher education, and the teacher education will influence, or if you are a facilitator, will influence the public and different levels about the knowledge, about the emotions, about the language, about the experience. And this is always something that is individual, but it is in time collective that are influencing the interaction. And that will be materialized through the discourse that will affect our interaction in macro-social process and micro-social process, and all that is connected. However, in systems that are very close, we can always try to find one way to co-structure of that. So, for example, if we are in one system that the educational policy are giving too much importance to this perspective of the scientific knowledge, but we can create a scenario of dialogue of knowledge. So we can bring this intercultural perspective, for example, if we are speaking about environmental education, what is environmental education in Africa, what is environmental education in Latin America, what is here, and it's the student that needs to decide about what is the perspective that he wants to be approached to that. But like to give the option that are different ways to understand something. So after to say that, now let's think a different educational scenario. Yes, the scientific knowledge is powerful, but it's not exclusive. Have one context of understanding, so we know that have historic process, political process, physical process that are influencing the moment. Inquire over memorization, so how we can create this critical thinking about the things that we are working on, and not just like to repeat. Use the exit methodologies, we are human, and it's important to consider other kind of activities like the art, for example. Use the emotion as a light. Some takeaways. One is transfer education and the training towards critical, reflective, and interdisciplinary approach. So how we can use the interdisciplinarity to discuss one subject since different perspectives, empower action to break the free from dominant paradigms. So it's like consider that always have a kind of hegemony in different processes that we are working on, and how we can change these hegemonies is our training process. The science, what is the purpose of science? We need to discuss with that. So how the science can challenge the status quo that are present in our scenario, create spaces for dialogue and plurality, reading critic, imagination and action, and act in the political and social arena. So it's like to remember that science is not neutral and education is not neutral. Always is responding as some kind of interest. And thank you, and some references.
Thanks very much, Maria Angelica. Any question in the room first? Or Maria Angelica? Start with one.
I would start maybe, yeah, perfect. So, how is it addressed the principle of, or if is it addressed the principle of restitution? Because now I bring the anthropologist, because we're talking indeed about a problematic that we have in anthropology since the 19th century, positivism, we know human zooms, this kind of, this theory of race comes from this, So one of the things that we implement is this principle of restitution, of actually not studying a community and bringing yourself, from a superior perspective. But this is, but bringing yourself from equal to equal, establishing a social and research contract with the community of what you want to get, what they want to get from the research, and what all the people involved, because if you're working with the communities in the Amazon, you have also, the governments and so on. So there is this kind of culture that has all these stakeholders, and it's a way to basically bring this into a common, a common good, and also respecting the bias. Is this also considered, for instance, in the frameworks that you show us of environmental education and science education?
Yeah, since the perspective I work, yes, because we can say in science education you have different levels of discussion and different perspectives. So one that I bring was a critical perspective. I have also the sociocultural perspective. And the sociocultural perspective are discussing many this relationship in the one more horizontal way. And that depends many of the approach of the teachers in science education or environmental education that you have. So for example, I know one teacher in Brazil that he was speaking about communitary education, and something that they try to avoid is because in resource in education, many times that the people go to the community, take the information and never come back. So with this teacher, something that he was using for a bachelor degree and master's and doctoral students that was working in the community, as for example, to the defense with the community and come back to different work, because many times students don't come back. And it's like use the community is one perspective of this objective. Because when we speak about your superior, is part of the heritage of the science, like the relation subject-object. So the person who has the knowledge is the subject, and the rest is one object that can be used when they want. So and that is also in education, we can see that like the teacher who have the knowledge, the students maybe is not considering the previous knowledge, or the perspective that education is transmission. So.
Okay, other question? Yeah.
Thank you, Maria Angelica. I was thinking in LPI, we have a friend beyond education working with the Center for Curriculum Redesign. I'm mentioning them because I work globally for so many years. I've seen so many frameworks. At some point, there are some which are coming, which are very strong and also adapted by OECD or others. So he's talking a lot about emotion. Knowledge is important. Knowledge is crucial. It's synthesized the history of humanity in many fields. And I think it's very important to recognize the strength of science as being the project of a lot of collaboration, testing, and so science shouldn't be too much criticized per se. Otherwise, we come to Musk and many others, with other realities. Emotions is key. It's the skills of critical thinking, collaboration, imagination, dialogue, many different. So these are very well listed. There's a character building, which is important, about courage and resilience and ethics and these dimensions. And this can be informed by many different cultures. There's not one culture where something is worth, okay? And then there's the metacognition, the reflexivity and meta-emotion, understanding of emotion. I mean, this has been now kind of written, shared, adapted by OECD for education for human flourishing, and very complete. I'm saying this. Then what is often missing is working a lot with people from the global south. I'm taking the example of Bangladesh. Okay, living in the north of Bangladesh, being flooded, and the worst climate circumstances. We believe that the experience from the people living in Bangladesh in the Charles is much better in terms of resilience than what we can get in Dhaka University. So it's very much about learning from very diverse sources. Or talking with Stellenbosch University in Africa, they said there's a lot of work done on deforestation and many other things, but it is rooted in the north, not in Africa. So the lessons are not good. So where is science being produced? How do we make sure that we produce some reliable science in different parts of the world? And then the way of teaching, for sure, science is not all, but for me, what you showed a lot was misuse of science. And the more I see the need of decolonization, the need of working with different types of knowledge and indigenous knowledge, it is very important that preserving some reality to the scientific approach also, because it's being criticized so much that I met people from the US in the street and they say, oh, you are defending one type of science, this is not the real science. And I found this very dangerous. So it was a long monologue, but to how do we build meaningful science in very diverse parts of the world? And how do we teach with emotions, character, metacognition? But that's quite well documented. My problem is not being applied for decades. So it was a long monologue, but
Let her answer.
Yes. No, it wasn't because the question goes to this one.
I can say that I am not against science. It's more like the perspective that we are using science. Yeah. Because, for example, I bring the necessity to use the science, but to bring critical thinking and emotions and English, because what we were speaking about today, we are facing fake news, maybe denial of science. People are reading more the research, for example, and are reading more in influencers. So it's important is like how we can link that with the reality of the people. So for example, when we are speaking about the resilience, they colonize, when we speak about the epistemology of the South, is how we can bring the scientific knowledge, but recognize what the other ones are saying. Because this perspective, I say, sometimes because you are from the South, I don't listen to them. You know? Inclusive being one research. So it's for that slide. How first we need to change the perspective that use the science is from the north, and how we open the dialogue with other cultures. Because it's the same like if we come just in here inside, when we speak about people from the farmers, because if we speak about biotechnology, many people are doing process with biotechnology, but they are not calling like that, they are doing in one empirical way. So that is part is how if I teach, for example, someone, just have their report science, won't be open to recognize and to have this dialogue with the different contexts that are very rich and can help to build that. And one example is that in Colombia, for example, we have some researchers that are using the use of medicinal plants. And after they are bringing the biology and chemistry knowledge to explain this cultural practice. So it's like going in reverse, how we can explain things of the climatic context with the science and not inverse.
You can tell that in Brazil is the contrary. We were talking about the South, global South, but we also reproduce, we have it's a science that looks over Europe, and this kind of things is also quite something that we have to question ourselves too in the South. I completely agree.
We have a question online.
Several questions actually online, so I will start. How can you reduce the knowledge understanding bias that strong emotions, such as anger or fear, can generate? And do you have other examples of pedagogical practice of integrating emotions into teaching? Yes. So how can we reduce the knowledge understanding bias that strong emotions such as anger or fear can generate? Do you have other examples of pedagogical practice of integrating emotions into teaching? If it's not clear, we can also maybe ask Emily to ask the question itself, if you want a clarification. Emily, can you put yourself maybe on loud and ask the question yourself? I think it needs some clarification.
Yes, hello everybody. So I don't know how to be more clear on the question, but a strong emotion creates some behavior, and when you teach some scientific knowledge, how can we reduce the behavior from strong emotion? And the other question is really about pedagogical practices. So you share some practices on discussion, and do you have other pedagogical practices of integrating emotion into teaching? Is it more clear or not?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think so to reduce the bias about emotion can be very complicated because we are recognizing the individuality. We can have one same educational practice. We can have different emotions related to one situation that we present, for example, about socioeconomic problem. One pedagogy that I can help to that is the boundary-friendly pedagogy. One practice that can help to manage and express emotions and the learning, not just emotions, but also, for example, the scientific part, what they learn about the subject, and have something that they call pedagogical letters. So it's like to invite the student or the participant to write letters, and when you write a letter for one friend, because it will come again for previous courses, it's totally different if I am speaking for my colleague, or it's totally different if I'm speaking for my friends. It can be exactly the same subject, but the words that we can use will be different. So the pedagogical letters permit, for example, to be more human, right? Use more this humanity that we have in the way to express our opinion or what we learn during the section. And normally, in this kind of practice, you can also appeal to the participant who are writing and can bring that to the letter. Other example is the use of meditation or art. When I was working, for example, in Colombia or Brazil, we were using of art. So I was hearing first some picture, like the screen of Eva Munch, like the Guernica, the Pablo Picasso. I was asking like, okay, what do you think, like, know the eyes of the artist or the eyes of the one art student, more like you. But this, you think that was the context that were expressing the art in that moment. For example, I don't know if you can picture in your mind the screen, the sky is orange. It's kind of orange and like bright colors. So why this color? Why the personages are having like one face of third eye? Or the Guernica, what is a different image that appears in the Guernica, or other kind of pictures. And it's very interesting what the participants can bring that out, because someone's can speak about environmental problems, someone can speak about emotions, someone can speak about the political context that the image are giving. And after, I asked myself also to design one environmental problem for them, and that is very diverse about their own experience and the own realities they are having. And they say that they can consider the war, for example, like one socio-environmental problem. But this is, for that, we open to that, we consider also the socio-environmental, when we speak about sustainability or environmental education, like this is more about that is the natural and conservation perspective, like including the social topics. So that is kind of one example.
And when we deal with emotions, both with qualitative methods in social sciences and, for instance, in anthropology or sciences, there is this practice of auto-reflexivity or ethnography that can be really useful and that was really written in literature. So I was wondering if you use yourself this type of methodologies that can help indeed to really construct knowledge not only guided by the subjective point of view, which is really important to take in consideration when we are doing research with human beings and the field, but at the same time with the need, as mentioned already, to take contact critiques and to objectivize what is happening. So yes, we do use this methodology.
Like, ethnography, no, I think so. The union and kind of resource to try to check the emotional part was in one of the last research I did for postdoctoral research about emergency education, and after we went back to more general in Saudi Arabia and Malaysia, and we wanted to know the emotions, the knowledge, and the practices that the teachers were having about environmental, about climate change. But where was more like a typical methodology of research, like this not really.
So do you integrate your feelings with the field in your research? Do you integrate it, or because it will be influencing the results, so you take it in consideration, or do you try not to look at it?
I think it's impossible to integrate this. Like I say, in some the research of education is not objective 100%. If you see we want eliminate the most percentage possible, that is always influence about our emotions, about our perspective, about our, when we are doing research, we are having our own interest. And if we are in education, that is always, the social context is always influenced. So I think so.
I will say that I try to avoid 1%, but I can say that it's like totally excluded because it's part of the functions. I am working since last year with the critical analysis of this course. It's sort of, let's say, we speak, for example, I get installed in one stream, if I speak on a colleague in formal language, but I will explain that to one friend, I will say, I will use one word, for example. So it's like, if we speak about the critical perspective of this course, and since this perspective, but since the perspective of humanity, because have two perspectives different, the one is more something collective, is to recognize individuality. And I work also with the perspective of environmental education and like the process to get better by yourself, first yourself, after the other one, and after the environment. So how I want to work, for example, with communities to help them when I am that person coordination. So it's like, it's important to consider like that. And I think that is part of the approach that I try always to do.
Another question online, and we can just get it to, is there a limit to expressing emotions in the classroom? And what advice for teachers to welcome strong emotions expressed in a course?
I think so that depends of the teacher, of the facilitator, because in some contexts have fear that emotions will appear in the scenario. For example, sometimes the students can just cry, and in some structures that produce fear and say like, we cannot put our students to cry. So it's like how we can permit be open to that, and after it's like what appeared about emotions, how we can follow that. Because many times that can help us to see that if we have educational process that go through more than one section, for example, so how maybe we can support that, and if we have one psychologist, for example, in the institution, how the psychologist can participate and help the student. That depends on the emotions and the context that they bring. But we cannot ignore that because many times that is showing something, and how we need to check how we can use that also in the benefit of the students. So for example, I remember many years ago when I was teacher of the school, I was in school level, and how one student I was giving classical biology. Normally in the school, the teacher needs to give just the content, was told how the students are doing order. And I remember how one student, she was younger and she was crying. So I stopped the class, I went out with her, and she was having one real problem. She was small, but she was already saying that how kind of student, the person that would wake her out of the classroom, of the school, and it was something about drugs or marijuana, I don't know, and she had kind of problem. I report that to the directive, and they were saying, oh, but it's impossible, she's too young to be in this kind of problem, maybe she's inventing that. And she was explaining that no, and she was really emotionally affected. And in reality, there was a big difference that had other students of other levels involved, and they needed to call the police about that. So many times, the emotions appear and need to appear. And we cannot use them like that, because if not, you can try to teach, but if the student or person is not there, well, what would have sense?
Yes, I have a question. Can we go back to the slide in which you put the different macro and micro levels? Because the question is today, yes. So, because here is is through the discourse analysis. And my question is about environmental science. There is a triangulation between institution, the social network, and the ecological network, let's say. Okay? Now the question is, in mental health education, it's been identified, because it's linked to the topic, a nexo level, which is an interesting, it's interesting, this part of materialization of discourse, because it reminded me to one of the parts of this exo level, which is a level that interconnects the macro and the micro. So my question is, in environmental science and in your different the different models that you're using, what would you consider as an exo level in this case, if it's the case, if it's been implemented or not, I don't know, I just know mental health education. So what would you consider in this exo level, in this communication between basically the institution and the practice, the educational practice?
Okay. Since the critical perspective of the discourse, have the social actors that need to be considered too, have kind of level of power, capacity of agency of these actors. But each actor is also having one kind of role. So for example, if we speak about education, we can say the someones are part of the elite and they can have one kind of level higher of the capacity of agency. So we can consider teachers and researchers like part of the symbolic elite, more speak economic elite, symbolic elite, and that will influence. And since this perspective also according with Stephen Wall, and we speak about the policy. So have 3 levels of contest. Have the production contest. I don't remember now the three names, and have the production, the practice is missing one, and we have institutions but have different levels of institutions. So, for example, if you have the National Ministry of Education, the different policies have the people who think the law. The production is the law in paper, it's that. However, from the law to the practice will depend of the person who will read that and how it interpret it and translate that. Yes, so we have, for example, the laws of national education. Okay. After we have institution, other level of institution, so we can say the school, university, or other kind of institution. And we can say that they interpret the law and they will create their own production of tests and they will interpret their teacher or the community, will interpret that and will translate in different practice. So I would say that it's like the link that we say that I tried. And if you see in science education, look how many people are working like with all this perspective. That this was from my doctoral thesis, and because we have like I bring like the perspective of the science education that are working with the more epistemology of the science. Another that is one community, and I learned that in Colombia. And after have the other community people are working with the critical discourse. And I bring them from Brazil, and I try to link these 2 perspectives. So normally the people in research like focus in one side of the discussion. But since the critical perspective, so it's that what I think is hard. We are bringing, because critical resource that is from language. statistics from science education. When I say science education, it's biology, chemistry, physics, and educational policy, decision goal, bringing political science. So it's like one combination of this one interdisciplinarity kind of.
There is a new institutional economy too, which model that's really.
I think we're done and we're right on time,
Yeah.
1 hour.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Maria Angelica.